Hi everyone, Mike here from Watch It Paint It, and in this video I'm going to be painting the new Biovore from Games Workshop. I wanted to do something a little bit different from the box art with mine. I want to paint some bright, vibrant, warning colors on this creature like you might see on a poisonous animal in nature. I'd also like to send a big thank you to Games Workshop for sending advanced copies of the new Tyranid models to Watch It Paint It. As you can see here, I have the miniature in two separate pieces, the weapon and the main body. You don't actually need to glue the weapon in place, it will snap on and off quite easily. The first thing I want to do is lay down some dark base colors. I've already primed the miniature completely in black, and now I'm using a big dry brush to lay down a coat of roughly 50-50 Macragge blue and Abaddon black. I'm not using big gobs of paint on the dry brush. I'm dipping it in the paint and then dabbing off the excess, but I'm not completely wiping it all off. And then I'm doing a heavy dry brush of all the armor plating on the Biovore. For the next part, I'm going to be using some light gray. This is Celestra Gray, and this time I'm going to be doing a very light dry brush. I'm first trying to get nearly all of the paint out of the brush before I start. Then I'm just gently dragging the brush along the edge of the armor plates to create a simple edge highlight. Next, I'm going to use a very small brush and then go through the painstaking process of putting markings on all of the scales. I'm still using the same light gray, Celestra Gray. Now, there are many types of camouflage used by animals in nature. My personal favorite is not the one that conceals you. Instead, it's the one that makes sure your enemy sees you and lets them know that they're the ones in trouble. So as you can see, I'm using a vibrant blue and I'm tracing over all of the edge highlighting and the markings on the scales that I just did with the gray. Next, I want to add a little bit of volume and definition to the exoskeleton, so I'm using pure Macragge blue, and I'm doing a light but thorough dry brush of the uppermost surfaces of the exoskeleton. For all the squishy underbelly and the little gill slits on the armor, if that's what they're called, I'm going to be using Screamer Pink, keeping in theme with the bright colors. One thing I would do differently before applying this color is to add a bit of white to the pink. Later on, I add a dark pink wash, but it would have been more effective over a lighter pink color. Next, I want to paint all of the bony appendages with an orange brown. Once again, I'm going to be using a dry brush, this time a very small one. All the techniques I'm using so far are fairly simple ones. I know that dry brushing can be a bit messy, but I find it easier to touch up small mistakes than to always try to stay inside the lines. And I'm lazy. I'm also using this color on the bony arms of the cannon and also the barrel. Now, just like I did with the gray earlier, I'm going to do a simple edge highlight with Troll Slayer Orange. This edge highlight is going to be on all the places that I just painted with Doom Bull Brown. Once again, I'm just going to be lightly dragging my dry brush across the most prominent edges of the scales with very little paint on my brush. I mentioned this earlier, but now I'm going to show it to you. I'm putting a dark pink wash over all the fleshy bits, and as I said, this would show up much better over a lighter pink. Next, I wanted to make some random patterns on the exoskeleton. Poisonous snakes and spiders and other creatures will often have brightly colored markings on their body to warn off predators. I want these markings to be a bright orange, but before I do that, I'm first drawing them out with Rakarth flesh. I also want these sacs on the cannon to look like they're filled with some kind of volatile fluid, ready to shoot a load of hot disaster into the faces of their enemies. So I'm also painting these Rakarth flesh. If I try to paint orange directly over dark blue, it's just going to make a horrible mess. After the Rakarth flesh is dried, I'm then going to cover all the same areas again, but this time with a pure white. Now I am ready for the orange. I'm first going to cover the warning markings on the carapace. I'm using 2 to 3 thin layers of Troll Slayer Orange to get a good even coverage. I'm also going to paint this over the eyes, which I've also covered with white. The next part is 100% optional. I wanted the orange sacs to look like they're glowing a bit, so I'm spraying white around the area with an airbrush. If you want this effect and don't have an airbrush, you can also lightly dry brush towards the sacs with white paint on your brush. I'm also going to be lazy and apply the first layer of orange with the airbrush, since I've already got it running. Again, this isn't necessary, and if you want to achieve a similar effect with a normal brush, then just thin the orange down to a glaze and brush that over all the areas that you painted white. Now, going back to this same orange, I'm going to stipple it onto the warning markings, but leave some dark orange around the edges. Next, using these three colors, I'm going to do a little bit of wet blending and try to make it look like the sacks are hotter closer to the center. I'm going to start off with the darkest orange and paint the most raised areas with that. Then while that paint is still wet, I'm going to switch to the lighter orange and I'm going to start painting from the edges of the dark orange down into the deep creases. While I do this, I'm overlapping the colors a bit so that they blend together at the edges. Finally, I'm going to paint yellow into the deepest creases and then blend that into the edges of the light orange. I'll repeat this process 2 or 3 times just until all of the colors look smooth. I'm also going to deepen the orange in the area of the glow by glazing the paint over this area as well. As you can see, I glazed a bit of the orange and yellow into the center of the cannon as well, and all that's left now is to attach this guy to the base. If you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments and please consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you very much to all of our patrons on Patreon. Your continued support means a lot to Ben and I and goes a long way towards helping the channel. If you like this custom base for the Biovore, I have made a video about it and it will be coming out soon. This is Mike from Watch It Paint It, and thanks for watching.